Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. Keep your relationship fueled up with strategies discovered by couples and experts. Because at Fuel Collective, we believe better relationships will equal a better world. You are about to discover specific insights and tools that cost little or nothing to implement to help you date forever. And now, here are your hosts, a couple who always have a half-packed suitcase and a date night in the calendar, Sammy and Nathan Yeager.
Hello and welcome to Date Forever. In this week's episode, we're chatting about the foundations and fundamentals for managing your money, using your goals and values to guide your money decisions, and the importance of having an emergency fund. Before we get into it, Sammy, what's been fueling you up this week?
I am fresh off of Girls' Weekend.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I've had a couple of days with some of my best mates and drinking wine, sitting in the sun, eating platters, jumping between wineries in the Clare Valley. So one of the girls had come over from Melbourne to Adelaide. I've obviously come over from Sydney to Adelaide. And then all of us got together in the Clare Valley in a little Airbnb for a couple of nights.
Very nice.
Yeah, it was really nice. At the start of the year, you and I had decided 21 goals for 2021, and having a weekend away with our friends individually was on that. So I feel like I've not only fueled up and that I've had lots of extended time with my girlfriends, but also that made
Ticked off that goal.
Yeah, made some progress on another goal for the year.
Yeah, very nice.
And what about you, Nath? What's been fueling you up this week?
So this week it's been really awesome to catch up with a hope of our mates who we haven't seen for a very long time. And I think there's just a different level of intimacy and different level of conversation you can have with someone in person rather than over Messenger or even on the phone. Like, it just seems to be that deeper level of connection or you can get some really good conversation going a lot quicker and easier than you can over the phone and get to really what's going on.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it has been really awesome. I'm looking forward to a few more good catch-ups in the next week. But now, here's this week's guest.
Today we're welcoming Genene Wilson. She is a licensed financial advisor and women's finance specialist. She is the founder of Finesse Financial Advisors, where she helps women get control of their money, improve their understanding of money matters, protect themselves and their families, build their investment portfolio, and plan a bright and happy future. Genene has been married for 38 years, is a prolific writer, and her articles have appeared in the Australian Financial Review, The Australian, Money, Yahoo Finance, and Money and Life, amongst other publications. She's also got a new book hitting the shelves very soon. Welcome to the show.
Thank you both. I'm really happy to be here.
Hey, so this is pretty cool because we've actually been on your show.
You have, and you did a great job. I can't wait for it to be released.
So I think we should start with a little plug for your show. What's your show called?
My show's called Finesse Your Money.
So this is pretty cool, right? Podcasters having chats with podcasters.
Well, it's pretty exciting. Actually, I don't even know if you're on Clubhouse, but I'm finding that pretty exciting just recently. It's like radio, but you can just meet really renowned people from all over the world without paying tens of thousands of dollars for accelerators or master classes or, it's awesome.
Yeah. The way that we have access and freedom to information is pretty amazing, isn't it? It's now like not the access isn't the thing, it's the curation. You got to find the good stuff.
Yeah, it's really good. So if you're not there, get yourself on there.
So as Sammy mentioned in your intro, you've got a new book hitting the shelves pretty soon.
I do. And funnily enough, we just changed the title recently.
So what have you landed on?
So we've landed on Live Well After Divorce, the ultimate women's guide to rebuilding post-separation.
Now, we hope that many of our listeners will not end up reading that book.
So do I.
And that's and I guess that's part of the reason that we launched the podcast is we want people to have really strong, healthy, happy, thriving relationships and knowing that that doesn't just happen and it does take some investment. But Nathan and I also, I think, share a pretty common belief that not every relationship is going to last for forever. And there are other metrics of success than duration. And sometimes divorcing or separating is absolutely the right thing to do for both parties. But hopefully we can have a bit of a chat about preventing getting to that stage.
Well, I think there's some fundamentals that will truly help.
Yeah. So maybe that's where we start. What are the very first foundational pieces of setting up a solid plan for finances?
So look, I really think to start off with having written goals across all areas of your life, not just money. So health and energy and fun and family, relationships, money and freedom and learning and growing and giving. All of those things are really important. Lots of people talk about work-life balance, but this is to me about having a well-balanced life. And so I think fundamentally having goals and values in those areas is really important. And then, too much focus in one area can lead you to fall down. And I think we see this quite a lot. Relationships break down because people aren't on the same page about money, and somebody might get really engrossed in their life at work and not be present. And you're in a relationship, you want your partner to be present. And then coming down to money values and goals are really important as well, because if you're out of sync there, then it can just lead to all sorts of issues. And in relationships, you just mentioned divorce, my book in that field, 50% or thereabouts of first marriages are still ending in divorce in Australia. And to me, that's just far too many. And so for me, putting a money system in place, and that involves goals and budgeting, really help. And they sound quite mundane and tedious, but in the long run, it means that you're successful. Then taking, half an hour or an hour a month to just go through those things and make sure that you're aligned is really important. Putting your money on autopilot, so setting up a structure that your money's working for you, even that, you don't have to put too many inputs in. No one wants to be managing every penny, if you like, but putting systems in place and a structure, and that might be bank accounts, or, some people, got a young couple I'm working with at the moment, have a splurge account. So at the end of every month, where there's money left over, tips into the splurge account, and they know when they're out and about and they go, oh, let's do something fun, they've got money there, and they, without thinking about it, they can go and do whatever that fun thing is. So, I think those sorts of things help.
So what is the structure you would recommend that, couples who are sort of at the beginning of merging their lives together in, the physical sense, but also in finance and planning for what they've set as an intention for a future together? What is what's the best structure for them to sort of start with? General advice.
Yeah, absolutely generally. Yeah. And I'm going to caveat this in this way. The more financial disciplined you are, probably the fewer accounts and the less structure you need, if you like.
We got heaps of accounts because we've got no discipline. Buckets for everything.
If you're less disciplined, you're going to need more structure, and it's just a simple truth. I know when I first got married, I used to have a plastic envelope, because in those days you had to go to
38
the bank
years ago
with your passport. In the last century, you had to go to the bank with your passport account and hand your little bank book over the counter. It's easier these days, of course. But what I mean by that is I used to put money in, mortgage payment, utilities, every little packet was there for me to look after. And I still think that sort of applies. So have an account where your income comes into and then automatically sweeps across to other accounts. So your saving and investment, it goes across there. Your regular bills, your health insurance, your utility bills, your rent, or, whatever you need, goes across to another account and automatically comes out. So that that's always taken care of. Obviously, you need a roof over your head and the lights on and food on the table. So that sort of structure. And then if you're using a credit card, debt is expensive. And so if you can be using your credit card, month to month in a limited way and have a low credit limit, so you can't overspend, and if you are subject to fraud, you're not going to lose a lot, but then sweep that money across and pay that off. Some people like to collect points, set up the structure that works for you. And for me, an emergency fund, I can't tell you, I wish I had $1 for every time somebody got stuck financially and couldn't see a way out. And that's a huge stressor in a relationship if the money just isn't there. So I typically say work out 3 or 6 months or whatever you can afford to set aside that really never gets touched. And maybe it is a really low-cost credit card with $1,000 or something on it available that costs you $90 a year just for peace of mind. Is it cheap? but have that there. I mean, I know from my own personal experience, if you had an accident, for example, and you're waiting for your income protection insurance to kick in, or you've had a workplace accident and workers' comp's got to kick in, those things can take weeks to come through, but you still got to pay your rent or pay your bills. So having that emergency fund is just absolutely crucial. I suggest that for everybody. And then you've got other things, to live in a society where you're not paying for expensive debt, then you need another account that saves for long-term things. You've got to replace your fridge every 3 or 4 years. You've got to replace your car every 3, 5, 7 years, whatever that is. But just sit down and make conscious decisions about what structure you need. People suggest different structures. I think it's up to you as to make those decisions yourself. And as I said, it does depend on how financially disciplined you are or are not.
Yeah, there was a few things that you mentioned there. One was our the emergency fund. Nathan and I used ours like last week.
Yeah, we did, definitely. Yeah.
Well, you never know when an emergency is going to happen. And I think back to, it's 12 months ago, that COVID happened, and how many people thought they had secure jobs for, many years to come, or until they were ready to take the next step or the next move to another company, and lost their jobs overnight. Many people live hand to mouth, and, having that fund there is really important.
Yeah, we were lucky that ours wasn't like a big blowout in the sense of one of us losing employment or a revenue stream.
Just a flat tire and an emergency dog sitting exercise, but that's all right.
Well, I mean, take your pet to the vet. I took my cat to the vet the other day, and I think I walked out of there and it was $220.
Yeah, but you love the cat, don't you?
The cat's part of the family. So,
No, the other thing that you mentioned in there around like household maintenance things, like at the beginning of this year, Nathan and I made a big long list of the things that were out of the weekly or monthly normal kind of expenses, but things that we were kind of forecasting. And it was things like, oh, we probably are going to need some new linen this year. Like we're going to need some sheets, we're going to need some towels.
And a new mattress.
We're going to need a new mattress. We knew that we've already done it, but we knew we wanted to get a new couch because we'd flipped our guest room into a full-time office. So we'd got rid of the bed. So we needed a couch that could accommodate visitors. But yeah, we made that big long tally of, I guess, things that were not normal but are forecastable. Even just deciding, okay, well, what of those things are we going to say yes to? What are we going to say no to when we look at the big long list?
Which ones are the priorities?
Yeah. Rather than going, oh, Sheridan have got a sale on, let's go get all of our towels and sheets and stuff, when that might not actually be the thing that's the top of the list. So for us, that was a really great thing to be like, oh, we're probably going to need these things. And appliances, they can add up.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
sandwich press. Like we went without a sandwich press for a long time, and that upset me.
It's funny you say that. I opened mine the other day and the bolt fell out of it, and I went, no. All right, how can I'm into recycling, and, when I got married, we had secondhand furniture from family and friends, and, even pickups on the side of the road.
Yeah.
For someone like me, if I want to replace something, sometimes it might be in, reasonable order to be passed down, but it's, maybe gone out of my taste or something like that. But you can't give that stuff away anymore. So I'd encourage young couples starting out to just take advantage of it. There's so many people who want to help you out. Take advantage of it, and then move up, save for those things, those longer term things, the new sofa, and buy them over time as you need them. You don't need it all yesterday, because I'll get to my point on my list here. I made a little list. So this is what a really important one. So shared values, it's so important. And so living outside of your means and faking the lifestyles of the rich and famous now can lead you to being genuinely or real poor later. So don't overstretch yourself. Your daily money habits just can make or break you. It's just crucial that you just get a handle on it.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that living beyond your means kind of thing, because we've spent this past 2020, let's just say 2020, we all spent it entertaining at home, really, and entertaining ourselves that way and not going out so much. And then Nathan and I have noticed, as we've started to go out a little bit more, there's a much deeper connection to handing over that money for that cocktail or for that schnitzel at the pub or whatever the thing might be. But there's just a much greater and heightened awareness of how much money that is.
And it might actually be the same price as it was previously, but it just feels more... It feels more expensive. It feels more. Yeah.
You're noticing it more. And I think that's true. I was away a few days. I had to go to an event on the Gold Coast, and I had a schnitzel at the pub with a drink. I really noticed the price.
Whereas before it probably was just like, that's the cost of doing life.
Yeah.
So I think we became more mindful over the course of 2020, which is just awesome, I think. And so the other thing I had on the list was really in the same line, making conscious and front of mind decisions about your goals and investing and, putting those money systems in place. And really, if you're not in the right headspace or you're not in the right mindset or don't have the right attitude, I think it's really resident on you to actually do that internal work. And I think, I can say this, you mentioned, Sammy, earlier, relationships breaking down. If maybe some more should have, and I actually said this to my husband recently, we've never gone to bed angry, but maybe we should have, So I think having the right attitude and discussing things openly and keeping those communication channels open is really important to being successful in a relationship as well, and dealing with any of those fears around money and insecurities around, money and life can be really important, and doing that work on yourself rather than building a mountain of resentment about it that just rots your gut, for the want of a better way of saying it.
Yeah. Can you give us some examples of what you mean by money values and values around money?
So, look, I think sometimes when you think about the lessons you learned as a kid growing up, things like rent money's dead money, so, you must buy a property and live in it, that sort of thing. So if you want to live in a particular area because you like it and you have friends and family there, but you can't afford to buy a property in that area, well, would you just simply rent in that area and buy a property in another area that's more affordable because at least you're in the market, for example? Those sorts of things. So rent money is dead money. Look, another one, I speak about this quite a lot, is I think a lot of young girls in particular get this message that, Prince Charming's going to come along and sweep them off their feet. And so they don't really need to know about money or learn about investing, or, their financial literacy might be lower. And I know we've spoken about this before, but it's just so important that everyone can stand on their own 2 feet financially and, make good money decisions. And I think if you can help each other and support each other in that way and be aligned with your values and, decide what they are through openly discussing your goals and your investment objectives and, really what you want out of life. I mean, another one is that, somebody might have in their mind that they want to work really hard, earn a lot of money and retire at 50, but the other person...
That's my brother.
The other person in the relationship might think, well, it's not a race. I can take my time and I can build toward it. And for me, I might want to work into my 70s or 80s or whilst ever I've got any wherewithal. So those sorts of things, those values and understanding of that is quite good to make sure that you are in alignment, because otherwise it can be reason to have a conflict, really.
Yeah. I know our values with money have shifted and changed across the duration of our relationship, which I'm sure is pretty normal. But one that comes to mind is that when we first moved to Sydney, Nathan and I both had a car. And what we kind of realised was that our rent was substantially now much more expensive than what it had been when we'd been living in Adelaide. And our need for 2 cars was nowhere near as great. So we kind of shifted the money so that we made the decision that it was like, okay, well, we're going to have 1 car and that's going to be a bit annoying sometimes. But what that is going to mean is that we get to go on this overseas holiday that is actually way more important to us than occasionally having to catch public transport or, work some magical logistics to get somewhere.
Or get a go-get car that's parked down the road.
For the odd occasion that we needed it. But yeah, it was definitely a mindset shift thing, because we'd grown up in the country. There wasn't public transport. So it was like people just have a car each. That's totally normal. And the unnormal thing for us was that, we share one for the household.
Mm. And I think it's, in that case, I would like to say that it's maybe got something to do with your changing values in terms of, societal values. Do we really need to be consuming those resources?
Yeah, we think that a lot now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't even, like, what would we do with the second car? What do we do? The car that we do have sits parked like 7/8 of its life already.
Well, most people's car haven't left the driveway in the last 12 months. I've forgotten how to drive down the freeway and have a phone call at the same time.
Maybe that's a good thing.
I mean, totally hands-free.
Yeah.
So from there, like, how do we start to kind of have those conversations about money and values and, like, what was money like when you were a kid and those kinds of things? Where do you start with that stuff?
Look, I think the best place to start is around the kitchen table. Mm-hmm. And so really just coming together, and as you're building up what that looks like for you in the relationship, it's, I know in my household, for fairly obvious reasons, I look after the money most of the time and pay the bills and so on. That may not be the case in every household. Maybe people share it. But whatever you do, whoever's, the primary person looking after the money and paying the bills and doing all that stuff, I call that person the family CFO. And so they bring the data to the table every single month, sit down, have a conversation, just talk it out. As I said before, attitude is everything. If you've got the right attitude and you come to the table and you seek to understand without judgment, then you can achieve a lot around the kitchen table. And I know that Sammy and Nath, you've mentioned that your audience are probably at the beginning stages of their relationship, but as you move through life and you get the dog and the cat and the kids in the bigger house or whatever that is for those people, that those are important lessons to pass on to the next generation, and those lessons are best learned around the kitchen table as well.
Yeah.
So you've also touched on earlier about setting money and financial goals. So how do you go about doing that? Because I know that for us, like early on in our relationship, we didn't really have a money or a finance plan. It was just kind of like merge it all together, and then we'll kind of figure out the buckets and figure out how we're going to deal with it later. So it has kind of been a real evolutionary process for us in actually working out what are our money goals and how to set up our structure and stuff like that. So do you have any tips, I guess, from a goal-setting perspective?
I think when you're really starting out, it's easier if you can picture something. Most people picture things really well. And so I like to say, let's picture a house. So the house has got piers into the ground. It's then got foundations, and then it's got 2 stories above it. And so the piers into the ground, what's grounding that house is, your health, your well-being, your values, your culture, your experience. So seek to understand those things because they're going to underpin everything else that you do. Then above that is the foundations. Now, the foundations of most people's money house is, for the want of a better term, I don't know where I came up with that just then. That sounds a bit dorky. That's a bit dorky. But anyway, is your personal income or however you earn your crust. So your personal income, whether that's from business or investments or, you turning up to a day job, that's the foundational level of that.
Or for our generation, a combination of all of those things.
Yeah. And so that's where, you need to really protect your income and your cash flow coming in. So you need to protect that. And then above that, you've got your emergency fund on the ground floor. You've got that personal protection I just mentioned to make sure that if things go wrong, that you are protected. If you have an accident and you can't work, you've got some income protection. I mean, later on as you move through life and you get a mortgage, you need to understand what you'd want to happen if something happened to you. So what do you want your partner to have to struggle to pay a mortgage without you there? Or, is it a simpler solution to shift some of that and pay a premium for it by getting some life insurance, for example? Mm-hmm. So those sorts of things. And then understanding what risks you're willing to take as part of that process and that conversation. What do we want as a household to have happen if things go wrong? What do we need? Do we need, our medical insurance combined? Do we need income protection? Do we need life insurance? Those sorts of things. And by the way, if you get those things earlier, it's cheaper. If you get them early, have them for a long time and set them with a level premium, it's going to cost you a lot less over your lifetime than if you wait till later on till you really need it. Some family history might creep in that causes your premiums to go higher, those sorts of things. So without getting in too deep, look at the risk and personal protection. And then sitting alongside that, and most young people that I meet think they're bulletproof and they don't need wills and powers of attorney and all this sort of thing. But if you're starting to accumulate assets, then you probably do need an estate plan. You need a will, because otherwise the state's going to decide what's going to happen with your assets if you expire.
It sounds pretty morbid, but Nathan and I always talk about this when we're on a plane together. It's like, what would happen if we both just dropped off the face of the earth? Who would be here? Who would have to clean up the mess?
Who would even have keys to our apartment?
Who would even have keys to our apartment? Who would pick up the dog from care?
Exactly. And
what a mess.
COVID's brought that into sharp focus for many folks, believe me. And if you lost capacity temporarily, you might go into hospital and have an operation and you can't make your own decisions. You need someone to be able to stand in your shoes and make decisions for you. So that's kind of the ground floor, if you like. And then you get in on the first floor above that, bit more sexy stuff. What are you doing with your cash flow? How are you allocating money to different buckets? How are you spending your money? Are you borrowing money to build greater wealth and that sort of thing? So borrowing money increases the capital you've got available to invest, that sort of stuff, investments and superannuation. And so they're all sitting under your roof as, sorry, I'm waving my hands around here. People on the podcast can't see that. How bizarre. So look, that's what I think of, under the roof of the house. And so if you follow that sort of structure and you have those conversations and you sit down and you plan that out together, if you need help, get professional help. But some people are quite capable of getting that stuff down on paper and refining it over time. Having it on the page and having a conversation point and developing it over time is better than having perfection. Some people don't start because they want it to be perfect. Just get started.
Yeah, I really like that advice. And if anyone wants some help getting the goal setting thing kind of started, episode 1, right at the beginning of the Date Forever podcast, we sat down with Keith Abraham, who's an expert in goal setting, and he recommends this exercise called the 100 Lifetime Goals. So that's a really great way to visualize, well, what might you want to do in life, and then what money might you need to generate to do that.
I love that. And I think it's really important because not everything's going to make it onto your priority list, but sometimes you don't know what you want until it suddenly materializes. People call that manifesting it these days. I think it's Alan Pease that has a book called The Answer. And in that he talks about how if you put something down on the page on your top 100 list, eventually you can manifest it, because as soon as you put it on the page, your brain starts to try and find it for you. So if you go back to that list often, your brain will eventually find it. And it's a bit like, and I apologise if I've said this before, but it's a bit like when you think, I'm going to get a new car, and you decide on this bright, shiny car that you want. It might be
and
an
then
Audi.
You see it everywhere.
That's it. As soon as you said, I want that BMW or I want that Mercedes such and such, next salute, every time you stopped at the traffic lights, you're seeing 5 of them. And so, your brain can do some marvellous things. Just get it on the page.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it does really help as well from a finance perspective that once you've actually written a goal down or have something on paper, that it does make it so much easier to be able to save for it or to be able to reallocate your finances to really achieve that goal too. So.
Well, I think it's important to be able to see that goal and, attach yourself to it and then hold yourself accountable to it. And from time to time, your goals might change. We all change and have different ideas at different points in our life. But, if you don't have any goals, you just go on this meandering path achieving nothing.
So once we've set those goals or those targets or spendings plans or budgets or whatever the thing is that you want to call them, how do we develop the discipline to stick to it?
Oh, look, that's it. I'm not sure that I can I answer that?
You haven't figured it out. Oh, no, we're doomed.
I think think the answer really is that accountability. And I think that if you lack that discipline, having an accountability partner is really important. And it might not be your partner in life, but it can be anybody. I was actually talking to a guy earlier today. He's a business coach, and we were discussing precisely this. He runs a business group, and every Monday the people in his business group write down the top 3 things they're going to do that week, and they take a photo of it and they send it to the accountability group. And then those people next week on a call say, well, hey, did you get that done or not? And I think, I wrote a book with an accountability group, and basically, 400 words a day, bang out the book. And it was just good to know that we were all heading in the same direction, and that if I was starting to feel weak, that somebody would lift me up and help me. It's all, what is it? All boats rise with the tide.
Yeah, a rising tide lifts all ships. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So I think, Janine, touching on that too, it kind of goes back to that piece of putting the structure in place to actually make sure that some of that accountability is actually taken out of your hands. So I know one of the things that we initially did, like we set up a savings account, but it was in the same bank as all of our other accounts. And so it was just really easy to pull some money out of it to pay for something. Whereas what we ended up doing was setting it up with a completely different bank. So it now takes 3 days to transfer the money from that bank back to our other one, and no cards attached to it. So
out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, out of sight, out of mind. And just, you actually had to, like, if there was something you really wanted to do and really use that money for, you had to make a decision 2 or 3 days in advance to even get the money in your hands to be able to do it. And I think just some of those physical barriers actually really helped us stay accountable in the early stages, at least.
That's that money on autopilot, just setting up that structure, whatever structure you personally need, setting it up. And, that's a great example, Nathan, just making it at a different bank. And, many people I know do suggest that, because, it does slow you down. You're not up the shops and see that bright red shiny pair of boots in the window that you just must have. You've got to wait your 3 days for the money to transfer.
And the amount of times that I've been tempted to get a card linked to that savings account, and I'm like, no, don't do it. Don't do it.
I'm sure Sammy holds you accountable there.
I think we have a really good
bit of an ebb and flow.
Yin and yang. Yeah. Sometimes it's me saying, no, we really shouldn't be spending that. That's irresponsible. And then other times it's me being like, just do it.
Like takeaway on a Wednesday when you should really only have it on a Friday night with a beer.
Yeah, no, for us it's normally like book the long weekend trip, book the flights. Just do it. Or a music festival, that's like things that are experiential are normally the thing that trip us up, where we didn't necessarily plan for it, and we've had an opportunity or a great artist or someone that is going to create a memory. That's normally the thing that we allow ourselves a bit of grace with.
Yeah, memories are important. And I think, to come back probably full circle, many people have a splurge account. If you've got that money left, if you've been a bit more frugal than planned in the month and you've got that extra cash, dump it in your splurge account, and you just know when that artist or that festival's coming that you've got that money there to just really enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So time together's gone super quick, Janine. But before we wrap up, do you have like one top money tip or habit that you think would really help fuel up a relationship?
Oh, so here's my best tip. Don't put Band-Aids on bullet wounds. So everybody's made a misstep. Don't be overly judgmental. Pointing fingers and shouting doesn't help. If there's issues there, addictions or whatever it is that's throwing you off track, then deal with those serious problems and get back on track as soon as you can. And I think the second thing I would say there is, it's never too early or too late to get professional help, whether it's in relation to what I've just mentioned or getting help with a financial plan. My youngest client's been 21 and my oldest moving into aged care. So, it's never too early or too late. But if you need help, get that help and deal with those underlying issues if there are any, because you'll live a bright, happier life without those resentments building up between yourself and your partner.
Yeah, I really like that suggestion or that advice. And I think that's something that we often don't examine is like, well, is this spending habit or behavior covering something else up? You know, is the impulse shopping actually covering up, oh, I get to buy this new shiny dress because that helps make me feel confident, and without that confidence I can't do the XYZ. So the underlying thing is not actually the spending habit, it's a lack of confidence, or whether or not
it's a fear.
Fear are a bigger thing. But I think sometimes we just try and deal with the topical behavior as opposed to the root cause. So I really like that insight to be like, you got to keep digging. And I think there's always more compassion for those, I guess, more negative behaviors if someone's actively working on resolving it and dealing with the underlying inner work thing that's causing the issue to come to the surface.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I Nath said one last thing, but I've got one last thing. We know that, we mentioned that yucky number of 50% of marriages in Australia ending in divorce, and it's still around 50%. But I know that I think it's around, someone will have to fact check this, I think it's around 80% of that 50% cite financial issues as the reason for filing for divorce. So what I would love to know is there a way that we can structure our finances or prevent financial issues from creating that conflict?
Yeah, look, I think going through a planning process, and even Financial Planning Australia actually now advocate what they call a ProNup. So that is having a financial plan before you're really getting in too deep into the relationship, because it will expose gaps in your value sets. It'll expose those biases. It'll expose those things that you feel are deal breakers in your relationships, and it'll expose them earlier, because I think things get very messy, and, it's like unraveling a tin of spaghetti as you've moved through life. So if you can just do those things and understand them, and, get professional help if you can afford it. But if you can't, having these sorts of conversations openly around the kitchen table and just illuminating these things will be very helpful in setting you up for the future.
Thank you. Can you give us the name of that? Or was it a ProNup?
ProNup.
And who was the provider?
Oh, it's Financial Planning Association of Australia advocate that. And,
all right, we'll pop a link in the show notes for everyone so they can track it down.
If you need a financial planner, obviously I'm available, but
Yes.
The Financial Planning Association of Australia are the place to go and have a look if you're wanting to meet a planner in your area, for example. Yeah.
I know that was one of the early stages that we went through in our, I guess, money evolution, was that we did feel like we were a little bit floundering and a bit out of our depth, and so we went and reached out to a financial planner to get that initial advice, and I think that really did help kind of level up our money game and not feel like we were trying to do it alone when we didn't have the expertise. So.
And look, the reality is you can spend hours and hours and hundreds of dollars and time researching for yourself and reading lots of differing opinions. Yeah. I think sometimes it can come down just to the money aspects of it, but a planner like myself, I take into account a lot more things than just the money. It's what's important to you. What are your collective goals? What's your time frame? How much capital have you got? How much cash flow have you got? How much time have you got to build whatever that, the wealth, for the want of a better term, those sorts of things need to be considered. And as I said, you don't need to shoot your lights out. Oftentimes people who are slow and steady end up with a better result.
Yeah. And I think something when it comes to money is like it can feel like such a judgmental thing, or like a big fear to show someone your numbers. And I think like no matter how bad it is, you can fix it. Like no matter what mess you've created, it can be tidied up. It's never unfixable.
I don't ever let it get to the point of bankruptcy or sticking your head in the sand because you can't pay your rent or you can't pay your bills. There's people out there that can help you. Financial counselling services, financial advisors. There's a whole range of people in the finance industry that can help. So you're not alone, and there are lots of help available.
Yeah. Hey, Janine, this has been amazing. We know that education, and you mentioned financial literacy being so important to you, and we advocate for you. And thank you so much for doing the work that you do. To say thank you for joining us today, we've provided a student in Indonesia a week's worth of classroom education. So thank you so much for making that possible.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thanks so much. I typically support the Aboriginal education, so financial and IT literacy programs in the Northern Territory. So, I'm really pleased that you've broadened my horizon with Indonesia.
Yeah, your education will go even further to people you won't ever even meet. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. So, Janine, if our listeners want to connect with you and want to learn a little bit more about you, or if you've got a resource or something to share, how can they do that?
So I've got a Bright Happy Future scorecard where people can jump online and assess any gaps they have in their financial literacy, their money systems, their goals, investing, etc. And they can find that at www.finesseyourmoney.world. And it's called the Bright Happy Future scorecard.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Sounds like a great resource.
It does.
We'll have to check it out.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
It's been my pleasure. It's lovely chatting to you both again.
Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.